Welcome to ABA on Tap. I'm Mike Rubio with Dan Lowry. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and always analyze responsibly. Welcome back to ABA on Tap. I am your ever grateful co-host, Mike Rubio, and I'm so glad you've returned for part 2 of our interview with Dr. Yev Veverka. Enjoy. Well, historically, it just speaks to, again, that pressure that parents face to figure something out. You know what I'm saying? Like that. So I think it's a good thing that you haven't been part of those conversations. I think, given, say my work in home, there was a time, especially when that Jenny McCarthy book was out, where I couldn't go into a home without some mention of a GFCF diet. And my concern to, just like you said, Dr. Yev, it wasn't necessarily, these, back then, those foods were kind of weird too. I don't think that the industry had caught up. So there was really, really flat, cardboardy cookies and things that just didn't taste very good, but now they do. So for me, it was more of like, these parents are just kind of barking up any tree because they're looking for help somewhere. But then, I saw success stories, especially in those situations where it was embraced as part of a full family routine, and they were all now trying something new. And, there was more opportunities for observational learning, and maybe there was more food prep happening around the child. All those things that I think you're alluding to as well as part of this general routine that happens. You hear things being chopped, you might be smelling certain things, you see and feel the heat of the kitchen, or you see the steam off the pot. These might be all cues that we don't consider enough. And
no, it's a great point.
Yeah.
So it's like an unintended consequence, like positive consequence.
Yeah. And we would probably overly task analyze those cues anyway as behavior analysts and, I don't know, do something strange with them. But yeah, I think to your point, that idea of a routine is super important in terms of predictability, in terms of familiarity, all those things that might put our guard down a little bit when, if we're an individual who's having struggles with that.
And avoiding that idea of you have to do the right thing. There's not a right thing. So I remember going to an appointment with a family I was working with, and it was in a feeding program. And I worked with them in home, but then they went into this feeding program. And at home, their dining room table was kind of like the drop spot for their things. They didn't use it for eating. They ate on the couch with trays. And they get in there to plan an intervention, and the practitioner starts by thinking about the routine, but she said, okay, so help me imagine your mealtime. So you sit down at the dining room table, and then who's there and what's on the table. And this mom just flat out lied. And I watched her do it. She's just made something up, because at this point, she couldn't tell this expert who's saying essentially to her, this is the right way to do it. She couldn't say, oh, we eat on the couch with a show we all like. She's twins with autism, lots going on. And that was their regulating thing that worked. And so instantly she's like, I'm not doing it right. I'm messing up. I need to rethink everything. And maybe that's a good long-term goal if she wants to, but in that moment, she needed a routine that fit her context and that worked in a different way. And so, yeah, also really individualizing it in that way, I think is so important.
I love that in terms of us considering the Norman Rockwell painting and this perfect idealized dinner time. And then knowing that getting there for this family is going to involve so much more work that detracts from our actual goal in terms of now feeding and eating. I think we run that risk a lot as behavior analysts, especially when we start looking at our assessments and we look at milestones and this is the way it's supposed to look. And then suddenly we find ourselves trying to replicate that vision and maybe missing a lot of the individualization. Let me kind of segue that, or use that to segue into the idea of early intervention and inclusion in general, which I know is also something that is near and dear to your work. We talked about eating and feeding. Where else do we maybe over task analyze? Where are we too good at the details as behavior analysts as it pertains to early childhood development and intervention? Again, big question. Do with it what you will.
I mean, is it too much to say everywhere? I think like I
Fair
said
enough.
earlier, I've learned
Fair enough.
I've learned so much from working on mealtimes and feeding. But I think that this idea of like asking more why and like not taking something down to that like function and then like just working with that, but I think we just are, like you said, over task analyze. We get to this thing and it's like this is the right thing, and we try to ignore all the noise on the outside, but we're missing then is like all the like family specific things, the culture, the skills of the parents, the
Yeah.
capacity of them, who the teachers are. Are they in like this, are they in a early childhood center that's based on like a specific culture? Is it like a religious one? Is
Mm.
it? And so I think we miss so much when we don't think of it holistically. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
That
curious what you all
that makes a
think.
lot of sense. It seems like a rudimentary like use of the matching law. Well, why? Because it's more reinforcing them to not do it. But why is it more reinforcing for them to not do it, right? We just don't really get to that next level. And it's just like, well, just give them more reinforcers. And it's like, well, let's figure out, can we look at the value of whatever the reinforcers are in their life before we're just like, well, give them more of, if they like iPad, just give them iPad for everything. Because then increase the iPad, right? So I think what you're saying is so valuable, and maybe that's where in our field we can kind of lend out other people's expertise. We can figure out what's going on, but the why piece and the like how to, whether it's eating or talking or things like that, those pieces maybe we can work more collaboratively with other professionals after we figure out, okay, this is what's going on. Now let's figure out why, and that's more of the family, and figure out how, that's more of whatever other expertise
Yeah.
is down in the nitty gritty of whatever those streets are.
And we think we're asking why. We say right. Like our why goes to function.
Yep,
But then, like, if I'm like, okay, this is an attention seeking function, well, like, why? What
exactly.
Yeah.
what else do we need to know about that and how this family functions? And maybe there's like a cultural explanation for why they're not getting the attention, and we need to work within those confines and not just provide it, like there's so many
Yeah.
questions we could ask. So I've never thought of it this way of like meal, like I think asking, I've been so focused on feeding recently, but like asking it with the feeding and the mealtime aspect it's an interesting to think about like translating that elsewhere.
I think the if we just stay at the function level too, that actually can lead to some ethical issues that we've run into as a field, right? Why? Because they're doing it for escape. Well, what's that mean? We got to not let them escape. Then you run into the escape extinction. Or why? Because they're
Yeah.
doing it for attention. And I'll see even people not in the field, but that have like a little bit of knowledge about it. They'll just say, oh, they're doing it for attention. So what does that mean? They ignore them. And now we have this where we're not really ethically interacting with somebody. And think about how dismissive it is to say, oh, they're just doing it for attention, right? Why is Mike doing? He's just doing it for attention. Like that just means I can ignore everything you're doing because, yeah, we do a whole lot of stuff for attention. Why do they want the attention?
Right.
Why do they want the
Well,
escape?
and how do we give it to them, right?
Yeah.
So just ignoring takes away the whole idea. Wait, they were looking for attention, and now we're not going to give it to them. So when do they get it, right?
Yep.
Again, I think we've got. I agree with you, Dr. Yev. We've got the right stuff. In fact, I know that my ABA makes my knowledge of developmental theory that much better, but I would hate to think of myself with no developmental theory and just ABA as a
Yeah.
professional because I'd be running much more into those things. One thing that I think of is play. Play behaviorally. I don't know that we've got a good
Yeah.
developmental grip on that, and I can't say I've got any good answers that I can relay.
What about sensory play, Mike?
Well, again, there's different types of play, and then that's a really we've boiled it down a lot of times in terms of stereotypy to the sensory need. And then there's a lot of discussion whether we allow it, don't allow it. How does that progress into something else? I'm dealing with, for whatever reason, it might be a trend on TikTok these days, but a lot of little guys with a lot of mouthing and mouthing behavior, right?
Mm.
You can look at that and it's like, okay,
Is mom still breastfeeding? The answer seems to be yes, pretty frequently with that. And then you think of that as from a developmental perspective, it's pretty important in terms of determining different textures, different things. Now, socially, people telling you not to do that. And then now you're a 4-year-old who's putting a lot of things in your mouth. And that has a whole different level of significance in terms of how your parents feel about it. How sick you're getting. You're frequently getting colds. Well, yeah, you're putting everything in your mouth. Again, it's just so many layers that a simple task analysis wouldn't be able to cut through. I'll think of things like, a tripod grip for writing. Kids hold writing implements so many different ways. How many years did I spend professionally trying to prompt physically this perfect tripod grip instead of just putting the paper and crayons out and letting them go at it? And guess what happens over time? They do the pronated, they do this, and then before you know it, they're watching you and then they're imitating. And we would have never thought of that as a nonverbal imitation, traditional do this SD, right? We would have never done that. But, we need to let that happen to allow for that developmental progression. And it's not pretty. Sometimes it's messy. And with food especially, you're getting things thrown off the high chair. And it's very frustrating. But there's a normal progression to development which behaviorally can present itself. The optics are like misbehavior, and there's an interesting gray area there. I said a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, I love that. And I like as you're saying that, I'm thinking like one thing that we're talking more about in the field is kind of those longer term outcomes. Like why are we doing this? Why are we adding one food at a time? Why are we changing the grip? And if we really think about like, okay, I can tell you why I'm doing it in this moment today, but like, can I tell you why I'm doing it for this kid 10 years from now? Adding one food at a time and doing escape extinction? No, I can't. But I could explain to you like why some of the method, like I always tell parents, I'm thinking about your kid as a 30-year-old, and I want them to be somebody that can choose how they want to eat, choose what they want to eat, make choices that are the right choices for their body. And that is that's going to lead to a very different intervention choice than I need them to eat 10 new foods in 6 months or something like that. And I think the same thing goes with play, with the way they're holding utensils. Like, what's the end goal? How is it going to promote like connection, inclusion, autonomy, right? Like all of those rights of people in the end. And I think that asking that question in feeding has helped me. And I think it could kind of like help with that what you were just saying about holding the utensil or the drawing utensil.
It's like we're really good at the the targeted goal, right? And what we're trying to change, and maybe that's our downfall, is we're so good at the task analysis that when it doesn't go in that chain of behavior, maybe we're not sure what to do next. And especially not our younger professionals who are deploying these things a lot of the time, like our RBTs. All due respect, they do so much work. We love our staff, but without that preparation, they may not know or have the experience as a parent or a professional or academically how to pivot. We set up these beautiful programs and then it doesn't go that way. Yeah. Okay, what next? What are you going to do? You didn't get to deliver your reinforcement. How are we going to prompt chewing, for example? Well, you're not. And I'm sure somebody tried in the past and it probably didn't look very good. Yeah. And it probably didn't look very good and it wasn't very good and the child was crying, but it was for their own good. And it was because they needed to eat and maybe they were on the brink of getting a G tube. So it all makes sense. Oh yeah, we should be doing this. And then when we step back and get to consider it later, it's like, ooh, we probably made some mistakes there. This didn't look good. It didn't do well. We've got neurodivergent community folks coming out and saying, yeah, that was a horrible experience for me. And it makes us feel bad. And then we can either deny it or say, hey, we're listening. How are we going to change what we're doing? And that's what I think you're doing, Dr. Yev. We appreciate that.
And the G-tube, I think that it's a good example of it because they'll tell us like, I wish you had just given me the G-tube. Like and families are saying that too. And so like that's another pivot. Yeah. Another pivot I've had is I used to say, like, I think I kind of convinced myself, like, I have to do this intensive thing because if I don't, the story is that they will continue to drop foods and they will be threatened with a G-tube. And I don't want to be part of that. And now there's all this research coming out. There was just actually a few talks at Feeding Matters conference talking about like the benefits of just choosing the G tube, because then you're not sitting there bite by bite. And I'm not saying it's for everyone. I think it's like an ethical decision making process. But I think that like saying that escape, extinction, and non-removal of the spoon is less intensive than a G tube is false. Like I just don't believe that
That's not
anymore.
across the board. It's individualized, to your point. That
Right.
one individual could say, I'd rather do this. The other one could say, nope, give me that tube. It's
Yeah,
fine. That
and
would
who
have
gets
been
to choose?
easier. Right. Well, and
Yeah.
then now you might be dealing with an individual who may not be able to communicate that back to the parents. They have to make that decision. It makes me think of my youngest was severely tongue-tied at birth, and she had a heart-shaped tongue and she couldn't feed, and we had to make that decision of clipping it or not clipping it, knowing that either direction could lead to eating and communication difficulties in the future. So if you cut it, it could happen. It could go awry. If you don't cut it, she could be tongue-tied and have articulation issues. So
Wow.
that's a tough decision.
It's tough, but you had the knowledge, you had all of it in front of you, right? Like
Right.
where I've seen families be told, like, we're going to do this to keep you from this intensive medical procedure without understanding, like, these are the options. Like I could do
Yeah.
this intensive medical thing. And again, like I think that some people don't have the capacity, the insurance, the financial, like they might still choose like, no, I want to do this inpatient intensive program and then eat orally. But if we truly present, like here's the balance, like here are the pros and cons.
Yeah.
What do you want to
Yeah.
talk about? Who do you want to talk to about it? If we truly present that, which I think is our ethical responsibility, then they can make an informed decision.
Absolutely.
So let's say you have a client that's just eating the Lucky Charms marshmallows, or maybe more commonly just eating chicken nuggets from, I don't know, Carl's Jr. or something like that. What are your kind of basics? So how would you, maybe what questions would you ask the family, or what treatment recommendations would you recommend them trying as we move away from pure escape extinction? Like what's kind of your playbook that you can share with people on the air?
Okay, so when I first have a client come to me, I start by just kind of understanding like what their goals are for feeding support. And often it is, of course, like increasing variety.
Yep.
But I asked them this magic wand question. If I had a magic wand, what would your perfect mealtime look like? And often it hasn't, they're not saying I want them to take bites of these new things. They say we're all sitting together, something along these lines. Like
Okay.
it's different for every family. We're sitting together, I cook one meal and everybody eats it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not fighting, I don't feel stressed, right? And like each of those can be broken down into its own many steps for intervention. So of course, like we're working on increasing variety, but we're also working on how the family is presenting things, how the caregiver is responding to the child. We're working on making the mealtime environment something that's fun. And we'll prioritize that with the family. Like, what's the most important thing for you right now? And if they say, like, I really don't want to do the G-tube route, like, I really need them to eat first thing, then that's where we'll prioritize. I always work with a registered dietitian if a child comes in. I've worked with a registered dietitian who's helped me understand some screening questions to know kind of like, is this a immediate refer for a diet inventory and a discussion with them, or can we simultaneously, can I start working and then refer them? But always work with a dietitian to make sure that that any food we're working on introducing or changing is going to be helpful for them from a nourishment perspective. But then like, as far as, I mean, I think some really simple things that all BCBAs can do as far as that, like, again, I hate the word rigidity, but like the significant preferences, the Carl's Jr.
Chicken
nuggets and only those, or like what that example you gave of the pizza and like
Yep.
deconstructing it. So I want kids to first learn that nothing bad happens with change, right? So like we're often jumping in, and this was me too, to like My child doesn't eat fruits and vegetables. They only eat the chicken nuggets, the milk, the goldfish crackers, the Ritz crackers. And so let's present a banana. But like we can't even cut the chicken nugget into small pieces yet. And so there's a lot of prereq work if we're going to not go the escape extinction route to teach that like when we make changes to food, it's fun. Nothing bad happens. We're not going to pressure you. I might like first start with here's your, Carl's Jr.'s nuggets. I love that that's our example right now. Here's the nuggets as you always have them. And here's the same nuggets. And I'm going to cut them. I'm going to use a cookie cutter and cut them into one of your favorite shapes. And like you mentioned before, like I'm not saying first this, then this. It's just like these are your nuggets, and maybe it's a little bit more fun to try the ones that are different. But again, like teaching that change is fun, flexibility is fun. Flexibility doesn't mean new food on a new spoon, and mom is saying take a bite, or mom's saying like if you take a bite you can have your favorite cookie, or mom saying if you don't take a bite then we're not going to be able to do your favorite TV show, right? Like we're teaching. So a lot of this is on parent, like
Sure.
teaching,
Yeah.
but we're teaching that this is all okay and it's fun. And that's when we have the luxury of like of time to, of course. So I have gotten pushback, and I want to make it really clear that I'm not saying that we're going to let this kid not eat and like not do well to work on that. Like this is where my interdisciplinary colleagues come in to make those decisions about, does this mean we do this while thinking about a G tube? Does it mean we do it while thinking about a multivitamin or some supplemental nutrition? And I always tell families like, whatever it is, it's not going to be forever. It's to like, do we prioritize, the autonomy and the fun and like making mealtime something that is going to be positive long term? Do we prioritize like this kid is not doing well physically and we have to nourish them? But there's not a right answer. It's a balancing act.
So you're saying you would, excuse me, present other stimuli there, but not necessarily with the expectation of eating. Just like present the banana maybe with a chicken nugget or no first then or anything like that. Have them practice cutting them and things like that, or playing with both of them, but not necessarily have them with the expectation of eating. Am I understanding that correctly?
So for like something like a banana, like something so different, yes. But like okay, I'm trying to think like a kiddo that I worked with who only ate Costco pizza, still doing the Costco pizza, but we're cutting it up. There's still an expectation of eating. Like, yeah, you have your Costco pizza. We're still going to eat it. We're going to have fun. Maybe I get a second one. And so there's like a little bit like where if we're worried that they're just not going to eat at all,
Sure.
and make slow, really, really slow, small changes. At the same time, we could also be presenting completely new foods and doing like the food science, food art with a banana. Again, like with other things in mind, like is food waste okay for this family? Is food security a challenge?
Wow.
Like there's so many questions. So I know there's so many
Incredible.
questions.
Yeah,
And
thank you
it's
for bringing
like
all
this,
that up.
yeah, push pull of all of it, but at the universal level, we can make food positive. We can make mealtime positive. We all know how to do that.
I like the way you describe that. It's a matter of can I have the extra piece of pizza to mess around with, knowing that I may need to preserve a slice or this kid's not going to eat. Where it might be our linear thinking to say, no, we're going to cut this slice up and that's what they're going to eat based on this contingency because that moves our premise forward. You're saying, no, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. It depends on do they have an extra slice to give up knowing that might go to waste, or is the parent around to eat that? I mean, those are things that, that's knowledge that you have based on your experience that becomes very hard to then disseminate in writing, or these are all examples that are true to life. So thank you so much for sharing all those. I do want to share that we did get Dan past the Costco pizza. He's eating a hot dog now.
Nice.
Which is really cool. And then we're going to add mustard. That's the next step.
Costco. For
His girlfriend's really happy because it was just Costco pizza every day.
Yep. Shout out to
It is
Costco.
good pizza.
It is.
The grease on that is like
Yes.
a whole topping.
Shellac.
So how do you get though from A to B? And I get, historically a lot of times it would be the like what, touch, kiss, bite, chew, swallow. Like that would be kind of like the 5-part, and that's I'm not saying that's current. That's, the last time I
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
worked on a food tolerance program was a long time ago. But how do you get those? So maybe maybe you have the banana on the plate, but let's say they're pushing it away all the time, or you're trying the food science and they're touching it, but they're still only eating the Costco pizza or the chicken nuggets. How do you get them from point A to point B?
Can I add something to that question?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think you're alluding to the same thing. You mentioned the banana just not being a good fit for the goldfish and the crackers. I think what Dan's asking is, how do you go about choosing that next item?
Yeah.
Texture, color. I mean, I think
Lots of good questions.
I'm sure the nutritionist has a lot to say about this.
Yeah, very
Talk to us a
helpful.
little bit about that.
And getting them to try it. Because a lot of times it doesn't even matter what the next item is. It's if it's not this nugget, I'm pushing it away.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I'm trying to think of some specific examples, but I don't like if I'm introducing new foods, completely new foods that we're not even close to biting. It's just for like exposure. And again, teaching new is fine, new is fun, new isn't pressure. I'm not going to force anything. What I work with first is like I'll have a family give me a list of like the always foods. These are foods
Okay.
that we'll always eat. It's okay if they're a little crushed up or like what are the rules around the foods? And I guess I get stuck on goldfish crackers because that's almost for
Yeah.
everyone. So if our always food list is a list of like beige crackers, it's Ritz crackers, it's Cheez-Its, it's goldfish crackers, then I'm not going to worry about the banana yet. Like, can we mix those crackers in a bowl? And is that okay with the kid? And if not, like, how the heck would we possibly introduce a banana? Like, but if so, then we're building this like predictable unpredictability. Like, I'm going to get things that I'm okay with, but like, they might be in a different shape. Maybe they're like I've done so many, like just so many weird things, but like crushed up goldfish crackers with a spoon. Oh my gosh, so silly. We're gonna eat our goldfish crackers with a spoon, and maybe we like have some fun with like I'm gonna take a big dinosaur bite or a little mouse bite, and we make it so fun to present it in a new way. If kids are verbal and able, and or like if kids are at a level where they can help come up with new ways to try foods and including them in it. And this is where our reinforcement really can come in. Like I'm not reinforcing taking a bite or eating a certain amount, but I will reinforce and like do a token economy or whatever, classic reinforcement systems, doing something new and being brave. And like then kids are learning all I have to do is mix up my favorite foods and I get a token, and that was kind of fun. And mom, like, or whoever, caregiver, played with me and it was fun. What if I added another cracker to it? And it just not like 100% of the time, it has just naturally progressed because it's fun and it's easy and we're making such small steps that then once I get to this point of like, okay, we've done all these things, we've been able to add, like a different kind of graham cracker, we've been able to put peanut butter, like a favorite peanut butter on a new graham cracker, then I might start thinking about the banana again. And I might think like, okay, we like crunchy foods. What if we like crunch up a banana chip into our goldfish crackers and introduce it that way? Always with something there that's like, you don't have to eat it this way, but here's an idea of something new, and just like slowly raise kind of what the requirement is for that token chart or reinforcement. So we're still like, I think people think that like I just play with food all the time and like it's not systematic and I just like hope that it will magically work, but it's so systematic. And we're teaching families to pick things that are new, or like another example, I just was working with a family who they bring the same food for a snack in the car when they pick their kid up from preschool. And I was like, well, what if you bring like the very favorite food for a snack? Would she eat it? And it's like, oh, I never thought about it. So it's things like that where it's like just mix something else up, get out of your like.
We're always seeing change as adding something that's not part of the repertoire. You're saying we can rearrange existing parts of the repertoire, and that's I love that, and I love hearing you describe it because I can completely relate. What would what would be your min and your max? And what I mean by that is, I'm sure you've had situations where you come in and it's like, bling, there it is. Now the child tries something new, and then you've had other situations where you've had to try and work through it for months before something takes. And the reason I ask you that is because I think that we're always after that. Well, how do you do it? How do you get from point A to point B? And what you're saying is, you keep trying, and then at some point it happens, and then you reinforce, you pounce on it. Is that, I'm not trying to overly boil it down, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at. Yeah.
You keep trying, but you are systematic about it, right? Like once I've seen success mixing favorite foods, I might put in something that's like a little bit different, but still really similar. And so it's still, like we're still upping the demand. Like, I don't even want to call it a demand. We're like upping the
I know what you
requirement
mean,
a little bit at a time, but it's still systematic. It's still shaping. It's still changing the reinforcement. And when I've kind of hit some of those dead ends, I really want to research this, but something I'm finding is that flexibility is challenging for a child in all other aspects. And so like I'm thinking of a kid right now who was on a G tube but would eat some random crackers and Skittles, but the Skittles had to be like the regular size, the specific color. And so we started with working on the Skittles, like crushing them or having two, like, here's your favorite bowl of Skittles, and then like watching me take some of those and cut them up, and they're available. Like once these Skittles are out, there's Skittles here. And he started working on those, but that was so slow. And what I started to notice and talking to family too is that this challenge with flexibility was everywhere. It was like, we have to walk into the house and put the shoes in the specific place. And if somebody moves it, I have to go back and fix it. And so we actually took a step back from the feeding part and just worked on like just little flexibility elsewhere, because feeding is like the one, like that's the place we have control. I cannot force anyone to eat something, chew and swallow it. And so kids who need that like structure in a specific way everywhere, feeding's probably the last place we want to work on it. So I've done this now with multiple families of like, we're not even ready for working on flexibility with food and changing food. Let's work on like where we're putting our backpack, or like pausing our show at a different point, or like adding another show to that, like rewind and rewatch the same 15 seconds, right? So like, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Too familiar with all of it.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think too with like with eating, and I know it's not an ABA term, but like I think the vibe is really important. And what I mean by that is, you were even alluding to it sometimes with your daughter. You're gonna get stressed, and she's gonna feed off of that. Yeah. And now I'm sure with these families, like you said, there's hundreds of times a month that they broach this subject, maybe 3 meals a day, 30 days a month. And then on top of that, every time their parents probably having some level of stress of, oh, here we go again. I'm going to present this food. It's going to be terrible. The child feeds off of that, in addition to their own stress of they're going to ask me to try something that I don't want to do. And there's just this whole atmosphere of negativity around the food. Right. And it sounds like both of what you all are talking about, because I'm sure one way to not get somebody to try something new is have them be really stressed out.
Yeah. Well, and then like you're, as a caregiver, you're also having avoidant behaviors, right? So like going back to our Lucky Charms example, the reason it became that was because once the kid dropped the little like non-marshmallow parts of the cereal, and every time the caregivers presented it, he had some challenging behaviors, they're going to buy the bulk marshmallows and prevent their own having to deal with it. So like everybody's being negatively reinforced.
Absolutely.
But if they had known, like, here's some different ways we can present it, don't give up, like, let's keep presenting it, but present it in a way without pressure. Let's present it in a different way. Then they could have kept presenting it and added on, but instead they kept like dropping. And you're not going to like, if you know your kid's not going to eat something, why would you cook it and try for repeated exposure?
That makes a lot of sense. This wasn't the question I was going to ask, but have you ever just had to tell a parent, hey, your cooking sucks. That's why your kid doesn't like it, because you talked about maybe it's your cooking. Have you ever had that discussion?
I have not had that discussion. We've had discussions of preferences, and but not quite.
That's not to say
Yeah.
It's not to say you haven't come across bad cooks, but you're not going to go there. I think.
Yes. I mean, I can't say I've sampled the food, but
We'll
we
let
talk
you off the
about-
hook, Dr. Yev. It's okay.
So I have one last question on that, and then I'll pass it back to you, Mike. Grazing versus sitting down. So sometimes, the families we work with, the kid just comes and grabs and then goes back and plays and comes and grabs more. Do you have any general thoughts? My guess is it's probably situation specific, but general thoughts on what you would advise parents. Do you advise them to try to have, no, when we eat, we either sit down or sit down with the family and we eat, versus when we eat, you come and grab a little bit back and forth and back and forth and back and forth? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, this isn't it's a good question because it's changing. It's another one where I think about like, okay, this kid at 30 years old, I don't know why 30, but like
Yeah.
that's in some cases that's not going to work, right? Like you can't go out to a restaurant or you wherever, like you can't go to a wedding or something and do that. And so thinking about like I'd have the conversation with the family, like what are our long-term goals? Like right now they're getting nourished. Is that our first priority? And do we want to work towards it? So it's a conversation with the family. Typically people want to work towards sitting down. But again, that becomes like a really big demand. And so a lot of times I'll work with families on without food, what can we do to make that mealtime environment positive? And so maybe instead of building Legos in the living room, we bring them like everybody else is either eating or maybe if we're not ready for that, we all just sit down and build Legos together at the table because maybe that's where we eat and we do favorite activities at the table and then go to grazing and then slowly shift it, right? Like we've got our Legos and we've got your favorite snack. So like we can eat while we all build Legos, or we've got Legos and we're all eating. So you're getting used to like the smells and the sights, but we're still doing our favorite activity. But again, super systematic. We're not just saying like, oh, that's just, again, I think this is a misconception about my work, but like, I'm not just saying that's just how they eat. Let's be neurodiversity affirming and let them do it. I don't think that's neurodiversity affirming to just like let things be without teaching other ways. But we are saying like we can do it in a way that doesn't cause tears and stress for anyone.
Cool. Thank you.
That goes off our very linear path, and I'm going to set us on our home stretch here because, believe it or not, we're at an hour and a half. We've been talking so long, and it's great, and we could probably talk to you for another hour and a half. We won't do that to you. It's a beautiful day in Seattle. We're going to let you go, but I think I could not have scripted this better. You describe going back to the idea of a G-tube. It makes a lot of sense if a child is to the point where they're about to get a G-tube that we might use some very restrictive form of escape extinction to avoid that. We could look at that and say, that's really compassionate care. And then you said, actually, we can't necessarily say that across the board. Let's talk about that. Talk about you recently were part of a very important publication, in my opinion, talking about compassion as the eighth dimension. I'll pass it over to you. Talk to us about that. I think we've alluded to it a lot during this conversation with a very important set of behaviors where it's easy for us to say, Dan's got a famous strawberry story that maybe we'll have him tell later. But this idea that
she's going to take my BCBA card if she hears this strawberry
I'm going to
story.
withhold this from you because right now it's in your best interest to eat this food. That sounds very logical. Sounds like a very typical parenting situation. Maybe you can describe it as compassionate. And then there's a lot more for us to consider. Talk to us about that.
Well, first of all, shout out to that whole author team.
Thank you.
Ashley
Yes.
Honey,
Didn't mean to exclude them. Sorry about that.
No, I know.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I want to make sure it's clear that like.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
That team is incredible. And our mentor, Eileen, on that one too. I think that paper came out of discussions like this of like, we can't just say something is socially significant and effective without thinking of these guiding principles that I think we have alluded to of like self-determination and like an individual's right to be that 30-year-old and make choices for themselves. We have to be able to provide those early. And so I think In one case, it could be the most compassionate thing to do an escape extinction procedure. And in another case, it could be the least compassionate thing. And mm, I think our work was intended to kind of present some questions to guide folks to making those decisions without saying like, this is ethical and this isn't, because there are so many different contextual variables. I'm trying to like, can you go back to the original question?
I was just kind of having it was a general premise and talking about compassion. Maybe another way to consider this, I'll ask a question now, is maybe the more poignant examples for us to consider is where have we clearly missed the mark on compassion despite thinking we were doing so? The G
Yeah.
tube might be a good example. What other examples might you share with that, given your role as part of this publication, which I think is, I mean, in my opinion, kind of probably one of the more important papers that's come out in the last several years.
And I would agree that it's so important. ABA has a marketing problem right now with compassion. A lot of times it seems
Absolutely.
really lab-based and really, refrigerator parenty of you do something and you get something, very transactional. And I think things like compassion and bringing that up and thank you could be one of the saviors or could really help our marketing problem because we definitely are struggling there.
And just to add to that, I don't think we realize when we're not being compassionate, especially when we're trying to right some wrong,
Yeah.
something's off track. We're the ones that are going to fix it. Go.
Yeah, so I think that the reason we really wanted to write this was because we didn't want to label something as compassionate or not. And I think we miss compassion. Are we good?
Yeah.
I think we miss compassion we when we try to make it like really binary or black and white. And so I think this goes back to kind of this, like the example we were talking about earlier of like, why are we teaching play? Why are we teaching the grip on a pen or pencil? And like, we can say it's socially, we can check off these boxes of the 7 dimensions. Like it's effective. It works. Escape extinction works for feeding. It increases we now have 10 more foods and we avoided the G tube, but we miss compassion when we don't ask, but like, what are the long-term impacts? What happened to this child's like motivation to come to the table? Does the family feel good about it? I think we miss it even in like reinforcing, like when, our ethics code says we should prioritize reinforcement. And that's not enough when we talk about feeding. And I'm just going to stick to feeding examples. But like I gave that example earlier, if I'm reinforcing someone for eating something that they don't want to eat and they're accessing reinforcement, is that really compassionate? Is that really leading to that, like, are we really doing no harm? Are we really leading to this person being autonomous and being able to make their choices? And I would argue no. Like if I'm saying you get this $5 for taking a bite of something that disgusts you, yeah, it might work and we're prioritizing reinforcement and it's not punishing and it's not escape extinction. But I think that we still have to ask some questions like, are we truly doing no harm? And I could come up with, I mean, so many different feeding examples if we don't break it down, if we expect eating something when somebody's not ready to do that, if we're, like reinforcing consumption over all else, we're missing compassion. So I think that it fits really nicely, those questions with the feeding work.
And so if it's the 8th dimension, how do you actually define compassion? Or how would you define compassion?
Yeah, it's tricky. This was one of the biggest challenges is like it takes so many questions to define it. So we broke it down into these guiding principles, which I won't try to name them because I'm sure I'll forget something at this point, but making sure that we are using those guiding principles to ask questions and like find that balance and that nuance of like, you know, are we who's choosing, like, do we have everyone's best interest in mind? What does best interest mean? I've dug into the bioethics literature in like the medical field that has some really great examples of that, like who gets to decide, are we thinking about the long-term outcomes. So it takes a series of questions to label something as compassion. And I think that we really get into trouble. Same with like neurodiversity affirming or whatever it is. We really get in trouble if we try to like say blanketly teaching eye contact is not neurodiversity affirming without asking questions about like, well, if we teach eye contact for this specific individual, what's it going to do for them in the long term? Maybe it is neurodiversity affirming. Maybe it is compassionate. Or like I think about, I have an autistic daughter and I've had to hold her down for vaccines or for some dental things to like go under anesthesia. And I think somebody could look at that choice and see that as physical prompting and not compassionate without understanding the whole thought process that goes into a decision like that. And so I think defining it is tricky, but I think it requires asking these questions that we haven't been asking as a field before.
I like the way you describe that in your own personal experience, because it's not to just blanketly say that holding a child down to receive a vaccine lacks compassion. You have to consider the entire circumstance around that particular vaccine. So that procedure may be an example of compassionate care in one circumstance, and then if it's applied generally across the board all the time to receive some medical procedure, now we're missing the mark.
Right. Now we're building a traumatic experience.
Right.
And like the decision that we made in this particular example, I know it's a lot for our daughter, was we, knowing her, knew that like when that building up to it made it worse for her. If we could have done this thing where we like practice and come home and go to the doctor every time. And there was no way that was going to be the best thing for her. And so for her, we held her down, got the necessary vaccines, and she relaxed. And she said, okay, I'm done. I'm done for a year now, and was ready to go home, and we didn't have to think about it again. And so like for another kid, maybe we have more time. Maybe they're not as anxious or don't have that coexisting condition, and we can work on it, and it's not as urgent. Like it's not going to we were at this point where we got a letter from the school that was like, okay, you're up, it's time. So she can keep coming to school. And so there wasn't really much of a choice. But again, like I can see from what communities are saying out there when things are made really black and white, I could see people looking at that and be like, how dare you make that decision? Sure. And I think that's where it gets dangerous. Same with like going back to the G-tube versus escape.
Right.
It goes back to, I mean, you use the term best interest, right? And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is that phrase best interest, which is tricky, right? Because a 5-year-old that eats Lucky Charms marshmallows is going to say it's in their best interest to eat Lucky Charms marshmallows, right? Because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed and they don't understand the long-term consequences of doing that. And a parent might say it's in their best interest to eat a well-balanced diet or to sit down and do homework all day so they can get a good education. And then we come in as therapists and we're kind of like in between. And sometimes we can start forcing what we think best interests are on people as well, which then creates the whole uncompassionate, or maybe uncompassionate might not be the best word, where we're now overriding, we're considering ourselves more important in that equation. But I guess back to the best interest piece, any thoughts on, especially some of the people we work with are not vocal, like balancing that best interest is so tricky, right? I'm sure you, even as a parent, you can take off your work hat. Like it's hard to balance like best interest, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Between you and your child?
Yeah.
Who wins?
In our work, like my amazing interdisciplinary team, not the compassion article team now, but the team that I worked with on our practitioner book for mealtime in early learning settings, we talked about this a lot of like, how do we recommend something? How do we present things where it's like there's all these choices and we want people to be able to take all of it and make the best choice at that time? And so what we did, I just had to pull this up to remember kind of how we conceptualize this, but we put like the individual's safety, well-being, and progress in the middle. Like that's our outcome. And then there's this push-pull of all of these other things, including like the autonomy, the nutritional needs that are sometimes in direct tension with each other. So like early learning setting rules about food, motivation, interests, feelings of safety, inclusion, connection, all of these things. And if you sometimes if you like choose one, you have to let go of another. And so if we say we're going to prioritize autonomy at all costs, then exactly like we're saying this child is choosing to eat Lucky Charms, therefore, and we're prioritizing autonomy, we're completely ignoring the nutritional needs. If we only prioritize nutritional needs, then we're probably doing escape extinction, and we're taking complete control over what a child's eating and completely avoiding autonomy. And so we have to find this balance constantly, and there's no formula for it. It's really hard to teach like a newer behavior analyst, as you all alluded to earlier, but all of that is necessary, and we have to ask the questions for every single individual case, which is tricky.
Of course, it's hard to teach a new behavior analyst. Nobody knows more than a new behavior analyst. So that's tricky. But what you're saying, like, I think a framework, like you're saying, is so useful for compassion. If there's some sort of framework that we could, like, provide parents as we look to make sure that we're honoring compassion in all circumstances, that I think that'd be really useful. And
Yeah, lots of work to do.
You put it another way too, which I think I just want to emphasize in saying, so in your situation, we could say it was neurodiversity affirming or compassionate to just let your daughter not get the vaccine. And that's not the case either. And I think that's really important. When we talk about client or child directed approaches, people will sometimes tell me, oh, so you just let them do whatever they want. No, not at all what we're saying.
Right.
It's really circumstance to circumstance. And it's tricky because we spend so much time creating these very linear plans, these very singular contingencies that don't necessarily consider the what ifs. And I think you very beautifully navigate the what ifs in everything you do. Despite coming in with a plan, you're ready for that pivot. You're ready for something to go off the plan. And that can be difficult for us as experienced clinicians. I can only imagine how much more difficult it is when we put a younger professional in that situation to figure that out. And, you've got the historical perspective on having to figure a lot of these things out on your own. And then now we're asking the important question, how do we keep those younger professionals from having to do that, knowing that we're going to preserve their individual experience? And then how do we relay all this stuff we've been talking about? It's hard.
Yeah.
Hopefully the podcast helps. Yeah. Dr. Yev, Dan, anything else? We're at a good stopping point here. I told you this would fly by. We want to get you back out of that Seattle sun. Anything that you want to promote or that you just want to put at the end here so that our listeners know where to find you if you want to be found, or point them to any sort of article that you think is important for our audience to find and read?
Oh, thank you for that question. I love that. First of all, I'm always happy to be found. I'm always happy to talk to anyone about mealtime and some of these questions, and learn so much from any conversation. So please reach out.
Careful, we might have to refer some parents to reach out to you then.
Yeah, no, please do. I am actually going to be doing some private practice, doing like telehealth family support.
Cool.
So
Good.
That's great. Families should definitely reach out to me.
Glad to hear that.
And Feeding Matters, I talked about them earlier, but just like a great place to find resources from those different disciplines. We are very underrepresented as ABA providers there, so I'd love to bring more BCBAs into that world. And then I just like, it's hard because everybody asks, where do I find CEs on this? And there are CEs in the ABA field on this, but that keeps us siloed. And so I just want to encourage folks to, like, yes, you're not going to get the CE for your recertification, but please learn from other disciplines and like go learn about basics of nutrition, go learn about like, what do I need to know about oral motor, learn about just like the basics, or make some interdisciplinary friends that you can ask. So I will always say, I'm not going to recommend like a ABA-based CE. I'd rather folks learn from the other disciplines. And
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Yev, you're a rock star. We are so appreciative of your time. This has been very enjoyable conversation.
Hope to have you on again in the future, in a future
I love
season.
that.
I already had an idea. I would love to, whether online or offline, talk about your experience. I'm guessing your child received ABA services at some point.
Oh, yes.
And then, okay, I would love to.
Well, we've tried. I've written
Okay.
about it.
Have
So
you?
feel
Okay.
free to, yes, there's a article through, it used to be Spectrum. It's something. It's just like a pop. It's an article that got me lots of interesting
Oh,
reactions,
I
but I
bet.
talked about how ABA didn't work for us in the way that it is.
I would love to learn more about that because I bet there's a lot of knowledge to be relayed there to the whole lot of us. I'd like to close with a few points based on what I've learned so far. I've got be mindful of your feeding routine. Think of your child's eating when they're 30. Consider compassion beyond just what works. And
Always analyze responsibly.
cheers, Dr. Yev. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Always analyze responsibly.
ABA on Tap is recorded live and unfiltered. We're done for today. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time.